Memes comments. So as massive creatures, we believe certain things happen rather than all things. That's an interesting claim. I think mass is part of that. I mean, the confusing thing about being a photon is, any photon we receive from the cosmic microwave background thinks the universe just started.
But I mean, this is precisely. I mean, the photon is simply the limit. I was going to mention this before when you brought up John Mazuris, but a photon is merely the limiting case of precisely the thing we were talking about before in relation to the hyperrulliad, right? That if you're sufficiently computationally bounded, you can't tell whether you've fallen into a space-like singularity or whether you've diverged off to future null infinity. Something else that's looking down on you can, but you yourself cannot. And the photon is simply, a photon doesn't know whether it's fallen into a black hole or not. And it's the maximal case of that.
So your point is the photon has so little going on. It's like you think about it like an ant has a small brain with only 50,000 neurons, but a photon has an even much smaller brain that really doesn't have any idea what's going on.
Right.
Yes.
Right. So somehow everything is equally interesting to a photon. It doesn't, it can't even make the ground level discrimination between am I in a black hole or am I diverging off to future null infinity. And so, yeah. And in a sense, I would say, mass does play a role in as much as, it induces. Okay. So this gets back to this interesting question, which we're kind of skating around, how do concepts like mass, momentum, energy translate between causal graphs, multi-way causal graphs, branchial graphs, etc. Right? There's clearly some interrelationship there. So, mass in the causal graph causes, that induces convergence of causal GD6 and induces a convergence of causal paths. The same is also true in the multi-way causal graph, except with some subtlety that we don't yet fully understand. And that, convergence of GD6 is the completion story. So, precisely because a photon is not, doesn't have mass, it doesn't induce completions. It doesn't, it can't do anything. It can't define any non-trivial equivalence function. As soon as you have mass, you're inducing convergence of GD6, both causal space-time causal GD6 and branch time GD6. Yeah. And those are inducing equivalences. And so it's, in some sense, you could say that our ability to define equivalences arises out of our mass somehow. But the precise details of how that works, I think we don't yet know.
Well, it's kind of like to know that something happened, to have some view about the continuity of things happening, you can't be skittering away like a photon. If you're skittering away to a different part of space-time, or whatever the photon analog of branchial space is, that's very interesting. All right.
Which is another way of it's an odd, intuitive, but somewhat intuitive way of thinking about time dilation, right? So if you're a photon, you induce no convergence of GD6. So you just follow your path, but you're not equivalencing with any other microstates. So from your perspective, nothing seems to happen. The greater your mass, the more GD6 converge, the more microstates get equivalence, the more stuff seems to happen.
Yeah, it's a good point. The fact that we think anything happens in the world. So basically, the problem for John's, photonic civilization is nothing would ever seem to happen.
Right.
I think his thing is, but maybe it interacts on an interstellar grain, and that's a pretty, watching the universe on pretty fast forward.
Right, but I think the maximally charitable interpretation, I guess, is that these creatures of the creatures of light thing is a story of what would hyperrullial and hyperrullial civilizations look like, and sort of to the other extreme, right? So if there were a hyperrullial civilization and or a hyperrullial civilization in the same universe as us.
Yes.
What would our interactions look like?
Yes, that's a reasonable way to put it.